My dad looked me dead in the eyes, across a table full of lobster, steak, and expensive wine, with every single member of my family watching, and said 5 words I will never forget for as long as I live. "You owe us that much." He thought he had me trapped. He had no idea what I had just whispered to our waiter 2 minutes before. Let me paint this picture for you. It's a Thursday night. I'm sitting at the far end of a long table at one of the nicest restaurants in Nashville, Tennessee. The white tablecloth has barely a wrinkle. Candles are low. And spread out in front of 16 members of my family, people I had not sat down with in 3 years, is a full spread of lobster tails, filet mignon sliders, shrimp cocktail, and a bottle of California Cabernet that ran close to $400. I had been told this was a small dinner. Just 4 people. A fresh start. In front of me, 1 glass of sparkling water. That's it. And somewhere in the next 15 minutes, a 20-year-old waiter named Tyler was going to walk up to my dad's chair and say something that would drain the color out of every face at that table. But I need to take you back first. Because this story doesn't start at the restaurant. It starts with a Tuesday morning, a phone notification, and a group chat I hadn't been part of in 3 years. If you've ever been the one person your family only calls when they need something, not when they miss you, not when they want to celebrate you, but when they need something, this story is for you. Drop your city and what time it is right now in the comments. I want to know who's sitting with me tonight. And if you're brand new here, welcome to Silent Revenge. Real stories, real people, real moments where someone finally stopped folding. Hit subscribe right now because you don't want to miss where this one goes. My name is Rachel. I'm 34 years old. I live in a 2-bedroom condo in Nashville that I own outright, drive a 7-year-old Honda Accord, and work as a senior operations manager for a regional healthcare staffing company. I oversee vendor contracts, compliance, hiring pipelines, and a team of people who bring me their worst problems before 9 a.m. every morning. I'm not rich, but I'm stable. I built that stability 1 paycheck at a time, starting from basically nothing, and I protected it the way someone protects something they know can disappear overnight, carefully, quietly, without making a show of it. But my family? They looked at where I'd ended up and saw one thing: a wallet with a pulse. I grew up in Clarksville, Tennessee. Not the part of Clarksville that shows up in real estate listings. Part where the neighbors knew which families were behind on their electric bills because the porch lights stopped coming on at night. My dad, Gary, did commercial construction work, big builds, bids, subcontractors. My mom, Sandra, did part-time bookkeeping for a small car dealership 3 days a week. My younger sister, Kayla, and I shared a bedroom until I was 15 and she was 12. We weren't broke. But money's absence was always in the room with us. You learned to feel it before anyone said a word, in the way Dad went quiet at the dinner table the last week of the month, in the way Mom started doing that thing with her jaw when she opened the mail. I got my first job at 16, bussing tables at a steakhouse on the highway. I remember coming home on school nights smelling like grease and fryer oil, hanging my uniform by the window because I was too tired to wash it before the next shift. My first paycheck was $147. I gave my mom 80 of it. The electric bill was coming up and Dad was waiting on a payment from a contractor that was running late. She took it. Didn't ask if I was sure. Just took it and said, "Thanks, baby." I want you to sit with that for a second. 16 years old. $147. Gave away more than half. And the thank you landed like a receipt, not like something that meant anything deep. That was the first lesson the Morrison house ever taught me about money and love, and how they got mixed up into one thing so early that for years I couldn't tell them apart. I worked my way up slow. Community college at night while I worked admin during the day at a staffing firm. Got good at seeing how systems worked, where the gaps were, how to patch them before they became problems. By 27, I was managing a team. By 32, I was overseeing operations across multiple locations with a budget that would have made 16-year-old me laugh and cry at the same time. I bought my condo at 30. Paid it off 2 years later. Never touched my retirement account. Never leased a car I couldn't afford to own. Never told anyone at work how careful I was with money because I knew that kind of story sounds like bragging when really it's just fear dressed up as discipline. The one thing I ordered every single time I went to a restaurant? Sparkling water. That's it. My coworker Ashley, who you'll meet in a minute, thought it was some kind of wellness thing. It's not. When you spend your 20s paying for other people's meals, you learn to keep your own orders small enough that walking away from the table never costs you anything. That's not a quirk. That's a survival reflex. 3 years before the dinner, my sister Kayla decided she was going to open a bakery. Now I love Kayla. Let me say that clearly because everything that comes after might make you forget it. I love my sister. She's the funniest person in any room she walks into. She's creative and loud, and when she's happy, she makes you feel like you showed up at the right party. But Kayla had never run a business. She'd worked the register at a clothing boutique for 2 years, watched some YouTube videos about small business owners, and decided she was ready to open a storefront bakery with a coffee bar in a high-rent part of Nashville. She needed $65,000 to do it. The bank said yes with a co-signer. That co-signer was supposed to be me. Mom called on a Sunday afternoon. I could hear Dad sitting next to her, not talking, just breathing through the phone in that specific way he did when he'd already made up his mind and was waiting on the rest of the world to catch up. Kayla needs this, Rachel. It's her dream. You've got good credit. It's just paperwork. Just paperwork. I asked to see the business plan. Kayla didn't have one. I asked about her projected margins, her lease agreement, whether she'd looked into the commercial kitchen licensing requirements in Davidson County. Kayla said I was being negative. That I always did this, always made things harder than they had to be. I said no. Not because I didn't love her. Because I'd watched enough dreams run straight into the math and lose. $65,000 in debt doesn't care how good your cinnamon rolls taste. Shows up every single month whether the doors are open or not. Dad stood up. I heard the shift in his voice before he even spoke, the way it tightened when he went from sitting to standing. If you won't help this family, then you're not part of it. I drove home. By Monday morning, I'd been removed from the family group chat. No call. No follow-up text. No second conversation. Just gone, cut out like a name crossed off a list. For 3 years, I was the daughter who picked her credit score over her sister's dream. The one who thought money mattered more than blood. The villain in a story I never got to tell my side of. Here's the part most people skip when they talk about cutting family off or getting cut off. Part 1 think you need to hear. The silence almost broke me. Not because I thought I was wrong. I knew I wasn't wrong. I knew co-signing that loan would have been a financial disaster, the way you know a stove is hot before you touch it, not because someone warned you, but because you've been burned enough times to recognize the temperature from a distance. But being cut off by your family doesn't feel like winning, even when you needed the distance. Feels like losing a limb. Clean cut, maybe. Necessary, maybe. But you still feel the phantom pain where the thing used to be. I missed my mom. Not the version of her who turned family dinners into strategy sessions and talked about love while keeping score in her head. I miss the mom who used to blast old country music in the kitchen on Saturday mornings and make biscuits from scratch and call me her little problem solver when I was 10 because I was always the kid who figured out how to fix the leaky faucet before Dad got home. That version of her didn't call either. And that was the grief I wasn't ready for. About 18 months in, I started seeing a therapist. Her name was Dr. Renee. She had an office off Charlotte Avenue in Nashville with too many plants and a white noise machine outside the door, and she said something in our 3rd session that I've thought about nearly every day since. Rachel, you trained them. Every time you paid, you told them that was acceptable. The work now isn't punishing them for what they did. It's just stopping the lesson you accidentally taught. Topping the lesson. I turned that over in my head a lot in the months before the dinner. The morning the invitation came, I was at my desk going over a vendor renewal for our background check software. Ordinary Tuesday. Kind of day where you look up at 4:30 and genuinely cannot account for where the last 6 hours went. My phone buzzed. I looked down and felt something cold settle right behind my ribs. The notification said, "Family group, Sandra added you." I sat there and stared at those 5 words for a full minute before I opened it. Chat history was wiped. Everything above Mom's new message was gone, which meant either they'd cleared it out to make things look fresh, or more likely there was a second group running this whole time that I'd never been in. Both possibilities made complete sense given the family I grew up in. Mom's message was warm. Careful. Kind of careful that tells you someone has reread what they typed at least 4 times before hitting send. She said she and Gary had been doing a lot of reflecting. That they wanted to have dinner at the Clement, a nice steakhouse in downtown Nashville, the kind with a dress code and a sommelier and a hostess stand that makes you feel like you should have made a reservation 2 weeks ago, to start over as a family. Just the 4 of us, she wrote. Her dad, Kayla, and me. Small dinner. Fresh start. Then 30 seconds later, a second message. Family takes care of family, sweetheart. It's time we remembered that. I went very still. That phrase, family takes care of family, I had heard it my whole life. Mom said it when I was 19 and she needed me to cover the gas bill. She said it when Dad needed a co-signer on his pickup. She said it when Kayla's first apartment deposit fell through and I quietly wired the money and told everyone it was a no-big-deal loan. In our house, family takes care of family had always meant one very specific thing. Rachel takes care of everybody else. I also noticed she hadn't said sorry. No, we were wrong. No, we shouldn't have cut you out. Just it's time to heal. No subject, no one accountable, like the wound had appeared out of nowhere and we were all equally surprised by it. I typed back, "I'll be there." Then I set my phone face down and went back to the vendor contract with hands that took a few minutes to study. My coworker Ashley, who sits 3 desks down and has an opinion about everything, which is usually correct, heard me mention it at lunch and put her fork down. Rachel. No. That's an ambush. My college friend Derek sent me a voice note that same evening. 4 seconds of silence then, "Don't go." But I'd already made up my mind. Not because I believed 3 years had changed everything. I wasn't that hopeful. I went because I wanted to sit across from my parents and find out, face to face, no buffers, whether something real had shifted or whether the silence had just been a longer version of the same conversation we'd always had. The one where I showed up and agreed and covered what needed covering. I needed to know. Even if the answer was the one I was afraid of. And I'll be honest about one more thing because some of you are going to get this immediately. I missed my mom. Not the manager behind the warmth. The woman who taught me to make biscuits at 9 years old. The one who used to sing along to old Reba McEntire songs with her eyes closed while she washed the dishes. That woman hadn't called either. And some nights I still heard those songs. So I said yes. I wrote one dinner, then home on a sticky note, pressed it to my steering wheel, and started figuring out what to wear. Before I tell you what I walked into, if this story is already hitting home, drop a comment right now. Just say, "I know this feeling." You don't have to say anything else. I'll know exactly what you mean. I kept it simple getting dressed. Dark slacks, a gray blouse I wear when I have client meetings, clean flats. My one piece of jewelry that means something, a thin gold watch I bought myself the year I got my senior manager title. Not for show. Just mine. I didn't want to walk in looking like I was performing success. My family already had a whole story built around me living well while they struggled. I drove a 7-year-old Honda and meal prepped on Sundays. But I knew how perception worked, and I wasn't there to fight about their version of my life. Not yet. The drive to the Clement was 45 minutes. Played zero music. Hands on the wheel the whole way. Somewhere on I-65 my stomach started doing that thing, that tight, low-grade pull just under my ribs that I've learned over the years means my gut knows something my brain hasn't finished working out yet. The same feeling I get when I walk into a situation at work that's about to go sideways. A warning system I've never been able to turn off. I almost took the exit home. Almost. But I thought about those biscuits. I thought about what Dr. Renee had said. And I kept driving. Clement sat at the end of a stretch of downtown Nashville I hadn't been to in a while. The kind of block where the valet stand is staffed by 3 people and the parking lot landscaping costs more than my first apartment. Kind of place where the hostesses wear all black and the menu descriptions are longer than the actual dishes. I found a spot and started scanning the lot out of habit before I even put the car in park. Dad's truck. 3rd row. Same dent in the rear quarter panel I'd been looking at since I was 20. Till unfixed. Till there. Mom's sedan right next to it. Then my Aunt Brenda's white Cadillac. Uncle Phil's SUV. My cousin Taylor's little silver hatchback. More cars I knew. 2 I didn't. My stomach dropped before I touched the door handle. Just the 4 of us Mom had written. Counted 9 vehicles. I sat with the engine off for 2 full minutes. Hands on the wheel. Reading that sticky note. 1 dinner, then home. The smart thing was obvious. Back out. Drive home. Eat whatever was in my fridge. Never mention this parking lot to anyone. But I was 34 years old and I had spent 3 years, slowly, painfully, with a lot of help from Dr. Renee, learning how to stop running when things got hard. I was not going to start sprinting in a restaurant parking lot in Nashville on a Thursday night. I got out, straightened my blouse, locked the car, walked in. Clement smelled like hickory smoke, cedar, and that specific kind of money that's been marinating in leather booths for decades. Kind of restaurant where they set the bread down before you even open the menu and you feel slightly underdressed no matter what you wore. The hostess in all black checked her screen. Morrison party. I nodded. She grabbed 1 menu. Just 1. And I followed her toward the back of the dining room. I heard my family before I saw them. My Aunt Brenda's laugh cutting through the murmur of every other table. Clink of a wine glass. Overlapping voices doing that thing big family groups do when they've been warming up for a while and don't realize how much space they're taking up. I turned the corner into a private dining room. 16 chairs. Every single one filled, except the one at the far end of the table. Directly across from my dad. Table stretched the length of the room. White linen, candles in low crystal holders, heavy silverware that caught the candlelight. And covering almost every inch of it, platters of lobster tails on crushed ice. Filet mignon sliders on a tiered stand. A shrimp cocktail spread you could have fed a tailgate with. A charcuterie board the size of a coffee table. And in the center, a bottle of wine I'd seen at a work dinner before. High-end California Cabernet. I knew the retail price, roughly $380. Already more than half gone. They had been here at least an hour before I arrived. And they had ordered everything on the menu that wasn't bolted down. The hostess paused at the edge of the room and glanced at me with a look I understood perfectly. A look that said, without a single word, "Good luck, honey." Then she leaned in and said quietly, "Just so you know, your dad left a card on file when he booked the reservation. Standard for large parties." I filed that away. Completely. Filed it the way I file things I know I'm going to need later. His card was on file. He'd booked the table. And in that moment I knew, with the kind of certainty that doesn't need proof because it's built from 20+ years of watching these exact people, that the bill was never meant to land on him. My mom spotted me first. She jumped up with her arms wide open and 16 heads turned at once. "Rachel! Oh my goodness, sweetheart, look at you!" And then, I'm not even exaggerating, they clapped. She'll applause. Like I'd come back from a tour overseas instead of from 45 minutes up I-65. Uncle Phil whistled. Aunt Brenda was already pressing a cloth napkin under her eye. Kayla raised her wine glass and smiled the kind of smile that's all teeth and no warmth. 16 people. Lobster and filet and a $380 bottle of wine that was almost empty. Just the four of us, Mom had written. I sat down. 'Cause what else do you do when 16 people are all looking at you, the chair is already pulled out, and a busboy is filling your water glass before your purse even hits the floor? I sat down. And I smiled. 'Cause you can smile through almost anything when your brain is running a full threat assessment behind your eyes. Mom settled back in her chair, absolutely beaming. We wanted it to be a surprise. The whole family all together, just like old times. I thought it was just the four of us, I said. She waved her hand. Well, once Brenda heard, and then Phil, and then Taylor said she could get a sitter. Big warm smile. You know how family is. I did. I knew exactly how family was. I scanned the table. Dad at the head, carving into a slider with the relaxed authority of a man who believed this was his room. Kayla to his left, phone in one hand, wine in the other, already scrolling something. Aunt Brenda and Uncle Phil in the middle, anchoring the table the way they always did at every Morrison gathering. Cousins I hadn't talked to in years, Taylor, Devin, my cousin Marcus and his wife Cara. A woman near the end I'd genuinely never seen before in my life, who was apparently close enough to Aunt Brenda to be included in a family reconciliation dinner, and was eating lobster like it owed her something. Mom squeezed my hand from across the table. See? Family takes care of family. There it was again. Same 5 words. Same warm delivery. Same target. I squeezed back and said nothing. Just counted plates and ran the mental math, the way you do when your whole career is built on knowing exactly what things cost before anyone shows you the bill. My dad is the kind of man who orders for the whole table without asking if anyone wants something different. He flagged down our waiter, a young guy barely out of his teens named Tyler, moving with the focused hustle of someone who knows this party is above his pay grade but isn't about to let it show, and went down the list without glancing at a menu. Another round of the lobster. 2 more fillet plates. And bring another bottle of that cab, the good one. Then he pulled his credit card from his wallet and held it up between 2 fingers like a man doing a card trick. Put it all on this, he told Tyler. We're celebrating tonight. Tyler nodded, wrote it down, and disappeared toward the kitchen with the expression of someone who really wanted to be anywhere else. Dad slipped the card back into his wallet with a little pat. Something was off. Not just a little, completely off. 'Cause I'd watched Gary Morrison argue the price of a cable modem rental fee for 20 minutes over the phone. I'd seen him return a coat because the sale price wasn't in the system. My dad did not hold up credit cards at nice restaurants and announce we were having the good wine. He did not do that. This was a performance. Aimed squarely at me. Look how good things are, Rachel. Look how little we need you now. Except the truck in the 3rd row had that same dented quarter panel from 5 years ago, still unrepaired. And Mom's purse, a Kate Spade bag she'd had since I was in college, was sitting on the chair beside her with the strap held together by a safety pin. They were performing. I just didn't know the price of admission yet. The little digs started around the 2nd bottle. Aunt Brenda leaned across Uncle Phil and said, Must be real nice having that big corporate job while the rest of us are out here clipping coupons. She laughed when she said it, the way you laugh when you want someone to know you're only slightly joking. Cousin Taylor asked if I ever felt weird about living so well when my parents were going through a rough stretch. Nobody had told me about a rough stretch. This was news. Kayla still scrolling, she wouldn't know. She hasn't been around. Comment landed clean and precise, like something that had been workshopped. Not scripted word for word, but coordinated, the way a group of people finds the same note when they've all been talking about the same person for long enough to agree on the melody. They'd shown up tonight with a shared story already written. Rachel left. Rachel has money. Rachel owes. Aunt Brenda delivered what I can only call the keynote address of the evening. She reached across the table, took my hand like she was consoling me, and said, Family doesn't keep score, dear. I almost laughed. Truly. Family doesn't keep score. From a woman who once stopped speaking to her daughter-in-law for 8 months over a seating arrangement at Easter Sunday lunch. I pulled my hand back gently and picked up my glass. Sparkling water. The only thing in front of me. The only thing I'd ordered. 16 people drowning in lobster and wine and filet mignon, and me at the end of the table with a glass of San Pellegrino like the sober friend who drove everybody to the party they didn't plan. Tyler passed behind me and quietly asked, "Just the water tonight?" "Just the water," I said. He nodded, and there was something in that nod. Not pity. Something more like recognition. Let me tell you about Tyler for a second, because Tyler is not just a background character in this story. Tyler was maybe 19, 20 years old, running our 16-person table almost by himself, because the restaurant had not expected this party to turn into what it turned into. He moved fast but never sloppy. Never sighed. Never let the stress show on his face. He refilled my water without being asked, twice, and each time he set the glass down quietly, like he was careful not to disturb whatever was happening at my end of the table. At one point during the evening, he caught me watching the table with an expression I probably should have dialed back. He leaned just slightly and said, almost under his breath, "Tough night?" I almost told him the whole thing. Instead I said, "You're doing a great job." He blinked, stood up just a little straighter, and kept moving. I watched him go and thought about 16-year-old Rachel, running plates and learning to be invisible and wondering if anyone in the room ever actually saw her. That girl would have needed to hear those words, and she would have understood exactly what I was about to do. Around 45 minutes in, I excused myself to the restroom. I needed 2 minutes with a door I could lock. Aunt Brenda's commentary was stacking up and I needed to let my face do something honest for a little while. Clement's restroom was marble countertops, cloth hand towels, a mirror that made you look slightly more pulled together than you felt, which was working overtime for me in that moment. I ran cold water over my wrists, took a breath, looked at myself. You already know what this is. You've known since the parking lot. The only question left is what you're going to do about it. And then I saw it. A phone on the edge of the counter. Green still lit. Hot pink case with little white daisies all over it. Kayla's phone. She'd come in before me and left it sitting there, which was perfectly on brand for Kayla, who once left her wallet at a Cracker Barrel in 3 different states and still tells the story like it's funny. I wasn't going to look at it. I need you to understand that. I was reaching for a hand towel, but the screen was still bright, and the notification banner sitting at the top of it, visible without unlocking anything, just right there in plain sight, showed a preview from a group chat I'd never been added to. The first 2 lines were enough to stop my hand completely. The group was called Dinner Plan. 3 members, Mom, Dad, Kayla. The preview read, "Don't tell Rachel it's everyone. Once she's there with the whole family." The message cut off at the edge of the banner. My hands were steady. My pulse was even. I picked up that phone the way I pick up a vendor contract that doesn't add up. Not with drama, not with anger, just with the focused attention of someone who needs to understand what they're actually looking at. I scrolled up. Mom's full message, sent 4 days before the dinner. "Don't tell Rachel it's everyone. Once she's there with the whole family watching, she won't dare say no. She never could handle a scene." Dad below it, "Just make sure she ends up sitting across from me. I'll handle the ask." Kayla, 2 minutes after that, "Order the expensive stuff before she gets there. Once it's already on the table, she can't exactly send it back a little." I kept scrolling. 3 weeks of planning. Mom coordinating RSVPs. Brenda said yes, fills in. Taylor can make it if she can get a babysitter. Dad mostly quiet, mostly logistics, reservation time, parking, how to word the invitation so it came across warm and casual. And then the messages that hit me somewhere low and cold. Mom, 10 days before the dinner, the bank called again this week. We have to figure something out before July. Dad, Rachel can handle it through the fall. She's got plenty. And the one I'm going to carry with me a long time. Mom, 8 days out. It's not like we're asking for money. We're letting her back into the family. She should be grateful we're even doing this. Grateful. They wanted me to feel grateful. For being set up. For being lied to about a dinner that was just the four of us. For showing up to a table I didn't get to choose in a restaurant I didn't book with 16 people I didn't know were coming to pay a bill I didn't run up, so I could solve a financial problem nobody had mentioned. For people who cut me out of their lives for 3 years because I said no one time to something I knew was going to go badly. And Kayla's Bakery. The $65,000 dream I'd refused to co-sign. I'd already heard from our cousin Taylor that it closed. 11 months in. The loan, the coffee bar, the cinnamon rolls, all of it. Gone. But the debt apparently wasn't. I put Kayla's phone back down exactly where I found it. Cream down. Just like she left it. Washed my hands. Looked at myself in that mirror one more time. I know exactly what this is. And I'm not paying for it. I dried my hands. Took one breath. Walked back out. If you've ever realized in a single moment that someone you loved had been treating your loyalty like a service they were subscribed to, hit that subscribe button right now. 'Cause what I did next, I planned it in the time it takes to dry your hands. And it worked better than I could have hoped. I walked back to that table with the same expression I wear when I get a surprise audit at work. Calm, pleasant, nothing on the outside that shows you what's running on the inside. Nobody noticed anything different. Aunt Brenda was telling a story about her neighbor's landscaping dispute. Uncle Phil was on his third shrimp cocktail. Kayla had picked her phone back up from the restroom, still completely unaware of what I'd just read on it, and was scrolling again like it was any ordinary Thursday. But I noticed things now. Things I'd been too hopeful to let myself see before. Mom's eyes kept drifting to Dad's wallet on the table. Quick little glances, like she was watching a countdown she didn't want anyone else to see. Dad's laugh was running about half a beat too loud, the laugh of a man performing confidence he's not quite feeling. The second wine bottle was getting low and nobody had suggested slowing down. Why would they? They weren't paying. I started asking questions. Casual ones. Kind you ask when you're genuinely catching up after a long time apart. Except I already knew the answers. I just wanted to watch them answer. So how's the bakery going, Kayla? Kayla's wine glass slowed on the way to her mouth. Oh, we actually closed. The market just wasn't really there. Fast. Practiced. Like pulling a bandage she'd been rehearsing. That's a shame. How long did it run? 11 months. Mom jumped in before the silence could breathe. Kayla's looking at new opportunities. She has so many talents. I nodded. Then I turned to Dad. How's the construction business? Still doing the big commercial stuff. His jaw tightened for less than a second. A tale I'd been reading since I was old enough to understand what it meant. Between projects right now. Economy's been tough, you know how it is. I did know. I'd read the bank called again this week on his wife's phone about 20 minutes ago. I nodded and let them keep going. People tell you everything when they think you're the one who's going to pay. They told me about the kitchen renovation they'd put on hold. The beach trip they skipped this summer. How things were tight but manageable, totally fine, no big deal. Every sentence was a window into a house that was quietly on fire while everybody stood in the front yard talking about the weather. Dessert menus came out. Aunt Brenda ordered a creme brulee without looking at the price. Kayla asked for a chocolate lava cake, one that, I noticed, required a 20-minute lead time from the kitchen, which meant she'd ordered it before I sat down. Course she had. They were running up the tab the way you only run up a tab when you're absolutely certain someone else is handling it. No ceiling. No hesitation. No glance at the right side of the menu. My sparkling water was down to ice. Kayla cracked it open. She'd had 3 glasses of wine by then, which for Kayla meant her filter had gone from thin to basically non-existent. She leaned forward with a big, easy grin, wine glass in hand, like she was about to say something obvious. Relax, big sis. It's just dinner. You can handle it. I set my water down. Handle what? This. She swept her hand across the table. The lobster, the empty platters, the wine, the 16 place settings. We ordered the good stuff since you're treating. Since you're treating. Said it so easy. Like it had been put in writing somewhere and everybody had signed off. Which, based on what I'd read in the bathroom, it basically had been. Table went very quiet. 3 full seconds of silence. Mom shot Kayla a look that said too early. Kayla shrugged with the energy of someone who bumped a vase and decided it was someone else's job to pick it up. Uncle Phil studied his plate. Aunt Brenda found her napkin incredibly interesting. But Kayla had just said out loud what every single person at that table already knew. I was the mark. This whole evening was a setup. And every piece of lobster on that table was evidence. Dad waited until the dessert plates landed. Strategic. I'll give him that. The lava cake arrived. Creme brulee was cracked. The wine bottle was upside down in the ice bucket. The table was warm and full and slow with that particular satisfaction you get from a meal you didn't pay for and never planned to. Dad set his fork down. He folded his hands on the table edge. I'd watched him do that exact same thing before he gave speeches at Thanksgiving, before he asked me to co-sign his truck at 23. A man settling into a decision he'd already made. He looked at me. Not mean. Not aggressive. With the expression of a man who genuinely believes he's being perfectly reasonable. Rachel. Small smile. You're paying for this, right? You owe us that much. 5 words. You owe us that much. 16 people heard them. Tyler, refilling Aunt Brenda's coffee at the cart behind me, heard them. The couple at the table nearest us, who had been doing a valiant job of pretending they weren't listening, definitely heard them. Mom nodded. Kayla smirked. Aunt Brenda reached for more bread like the thing was settled. And not one single person at that table had said they were sorry. Not one had said they'd been wrong. Not one had said they missed me for any reason other than what I could do for them. You owe us that much. I looked at my dad across a table covered in the evidence of a meal I didn't order, surrounded by a family I wasn't told was coming, holding a glass of water that was the only thing I'd asked for. And I felt something I was not expecting. Relief. Because the decision I'd been afraid to make for 3 years had just been made for me. I didn't answer right away. 'Cause silence does more work than words in a room full of people who are used to being agreed with. 3 seconds. 5. Kind of silence that makes 16 people shift in their seats and reach for their glasses and suddenly find something fascinating on the wall behind you. For 15 years I had paid so nobody would make a scene. I'd picked up tabs and wired deposits and co-signed things and covered bills and called it love, because the price of saying no was always a room exactly like this one, full of watching faces, full of the unspoken message that my worth was measured in what I could produce. I looked at Dad. Hands folded. Waiting. I looked at Mom. Warm. Performing. I looked at Kayla, who was already back on her phone because as far as she was concerned, this was done. I looked at Tyler standing near the service station, watching our table with the quiet attention of someone who can feel that something's happening but hasn't figured out what yet. Then I looked at my sparkling water. Half full. Catching the candlelight. I put my napkin on the table. Let me go take care of things, I said. And I stood up. Mom exhaled. Aunt Brenda actually pressed her hand to her chest. Dad unfolded his hands. Every single person at that table believed I was walking to pay the bill. Here's something 15 years of working in operations teaches you. Person who controls the outcome isn't always the loudest person in the room. They're the one who moves first and quietly. My family thought they had this wrapped up. They'd chosen the restaurant, built the guest list, run up the tab, assembled 16 witnesses, and delivered the demand in front of all of them to make sure I couldn't say no without making a scene. They had the lobster, the wine, the 3 years of pressure, and the audience. I had 2 sentences and a waiter named Tyler. I did not walk toward the front of the restaurant. I walked toward the back, to the service station where Tyler was organizing checkbooks and a floor manager named Kevin was going over a ticket. Kevin was the kind of guy who'd clearly been doing this job long enough that nothing surprised him anymore. Calm eyes. Measured. The demeanor of someone who's handled every possible version of a difficult table. I walked up to him and kept my voice low. The volume you use when something doesn't need the whole dining room involved. I'm not hosting this table tonight and I won't be covering the check. Please bring the full bill to the gentleman at the head, the one whose card is already on file for the reservation. Kevin looked at me. Looked at Tyler. Looked back at me. And one more thing, can you split my sparkling water onto a separate check and add 30% for your team? You've both earned it tonight. Tyler's eyes went wide. Kevin studied me for 3 full seconds, reading the situation the way a good floor manager reads every situation, fast and thorough and without judgment. Then he nodded once. Done. That was it. No questions. No, are you absolutely sure? Because Kevin had been around long enough to recognize a redirect when he saw one, and Tyler had been watching our table long enough to understand exactly why this one was necessary. I paid my check on the spot. 1 sparkling water. 3 refills. 30% tip. Kevin ran my card, handed me the receipt, and said quietly, I'll bring the table's check out in about 10 minutes after the dessert course settles. Perfect, I said. I walked back to the table. Sat down. Picked up my water. Took a slow sip. Kayla was debating something with cousin Devin. Aunt Brenda was back on the landscaping neighbor story version 2. Mom was watching me with the focused ease of someone who thinks the problem has been handled. Dad had his arms crossed and that settled look on his face, the look of a man who believes things are going the way he planned. I sat at my end of the table and waited with them. Those 10 minutes were the most peaceful I'd felt all night. The dessert plates were cleared. Candles had burned lower in their crystal holders. The last of the wine was gone. Tyler appeared at the edge of the private dining room. I knew before he took his first step exactly where he was walking. He set the leather check holder, the Clement's name embossed in gold on the front, directly in front of my dad. Not in the center of the table. Not near me. In front of Gary Morrison. The man who booked the reservation put his card on file and told this entire table 2 hours ago to put it all on this. The room went silent the way a room does when 16 people all hear the same unexpected thing at exactly the same second. Dad stared at that check holder. I watched him process it. Check was supposed to go to Rachel. Check is in front of me. Mom's composure cracked, just the edges of it, just enough. Her eyes went to the check, then to me, then back. Rachel. Dad recovered fast. He was good at that. He picked up the check with a casual flip, didn't look at the total, couldn't look at the total, not with 16 people watching, pulled his card from his wallet with that same little 2-finger hold from earlier and handed it to Tyler. We're celebrating, remember? Tyler took it gently. I'll be right back, sir. The way he said it was careful. The way you say something when you already know what's coming. Dad leaned back. Crossed his arms. Looked at me with the full confidence of a man who believed his card was about to close the evening out clean. Tyler came back in 4 minutes. He leaned down beside Dad's chair and said, at a volume designed to be discreet but heard by a table that had gone completely, utterly silent. I'm so sorry, sir. The card isn't going through. No one moved. Dad's smile held for exactly 1 more second, pure reflex, like a lamp that stays on for a beat after you flip the switch. Then it went out. Run it again. Tyler nodded. Disappeared. 2 minutes. Same lean. Same quiet voice. Still not going through. Would you like to try a different card? Dad's hand went into his wallet. I watched his fingers move through it, one card, then another, then a third he pulled from behind his driver's license like he'd forgotten it was there. He handed it to Tyler. 16 people. Not a single fork moving. Not a word. Just the sound of the room being very, very still. Tyler came back a third time. He didn't have to say anything. His face said it. Dad looked at him. Then he looked at me. Not with anger. Not yet. With something rawer than that. The unguarded expression of a man who has just understood, in front of every person whose opinion has ever mattered to him, that what he was counting on isn't there. That the ground he thought was solid is not. He looked at me the way you look at a lifeboat that's already moving away from the dock. I picked up my sparkling water. Took a sip. Set it down. I don't owe you. I never did. Dad's chair scraped back against the hardwood floor. Rachel. His voice was low. Controlled. Shaking at the edges. What did you do? I didn't do anything, Dad. Your card was declined. That's between you and your bank. You were supposed to. He stopped himself. But not in time. The sentence hung there, half-finished, visible to everyone. You were supposed to pay. Mom started crying. Not the quiet kind, the kind with volume and gasps and enough performance that the table next to us glanced over. After everything we've done for you, after everything. What did you do for me, Mom? My voice stayed even. I didn't raise it. I didn't lean forward. I sat still with my hands around my glass and I asked it plainly. Tell me, in front of everyone here, what did you do for me in the last 3 years? Silence. Kayla slammed her hand on the table. This is so typical. You always have to make it about yourself. Aunt Brenda reached for my arm. Rachel, honey, your dad is embarrassed. Can't you just... No. One word. Clear. Final. Not screamed, not cruel. Just final. Then Dad broke. Not with anger this time, with something that was much harder to watch. His voice dropped to something small and tired, and for one honest moment he sounded like a man standing in a dark house alone. Rachel. Please. We're drowning. I saw it. I really did. The scared man underneath all the performance. The dad who'd lost his business and his pride and couldn't say it out loud until a credit card machine said it for him in front of 16 witnesses. I saw him and I felt the ache move through me. Then he said, and you just let us. The ache stopped. 'Cause even underwater, he was still reaching for my wallet instead of my hand. I stood up. Not fast. Not dramatic. The way you stand up when the decision is already made and you don't need anyone's permission to act on it. Dad, I'm sorry you're struggling. I mean that genuinely. But this, I looked at the table. The empty platters. The upside-down bottles. The 16 faces. This isn't asking for help. This is a trap. You didn't invite me here to make things right. You invited me here to make a payment. Mom's voice went sharp. That is not fair. We just wanted you back. You wanted me back for what I could cover. I know because I read the messages. Dad can cover us through the fall. That was 8 days ago. On Kayla's phone. The air went out of the room. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Kayla's face went pale. Dad looked at the tablecloth. If you two need real help, actual help, not a setup with lobster and an audience, I will sit down with you and a financial counselor and we will figure out a plan together. No tricks. No surprise guests. No $400 wine. But I am not paying this bill. I didn't order it. Nobody told me about it. And I don't owe it to you. I don't owe you anything. I never did. I picked up my purse. You spent my whole life telling me family takes care of family. So why was I always the only one doing it? Nobody spoke. I walked out, past the busboy, past the hostess, through the heavy front doors, out into the warm Nashville night. Tyler caught me near the coat check. He was holding my receipt. "Thank you," he said. Quiet. Like he meant it specifically, not generally. I touched his shoulder. "You did great tonight. For real." Then I walked to my car. It was warm out. A little muggy the way Nashville gets in the early summer. Cicadas doing their thing in the trees around the parking lot. Half a moon over the strip of downtown buildings. I got in my car. Engine off. Window down. Read the sticky note on my steering wheel. One dinner, then home. I opened the family group chat. The messages were already coming in. Mom, Aunt Brenda, Kayla, cousins I hadn't heard from in years, all going at once. A flood of outrage and exclamation points and the very specific kind of anger that only comes from people who've been caught doing exactly what they were doing. I didn't read a single one. I scrolled to the bottom. Tapped leave group. Rachel has left the chat. I set my phone on the passenger seat. Started the engine. Drove home in the same quiet I'd driven there, except this time the quiet wasn't nervous. It was mine. The days after were quieter than I expected. No calls that night. Not the next day. Not the day after that. A week later, my cousin Taylor reached out separately. Not in the group, just a plain text to my number. She wrote, "I just want you to know." That was the most honest thing I've seen at a family dinner in my entire life. I'm sorry I was there for it without saying anything. Taylor was the only one who apologized. 3 weeks after the dinner, Kayla texted me. Not to say sorry. To ask if she could borrow first and last month's rent for a new apartment. I sent her the contact info for a non-profit financial counseling service in Nashville and told her I genuinely hope things got better for her. She never texted back. Through Taylor, I learned the full picture over the next few months. Dad's construction business had folded about a year and a half before the dinner. 2 commercial projects went sideways. A subcontractor dispute drained what was left. Mom had been rotating between credit cards, covering minimums with a home equity line that was now maxed out. Their house went on the market in the fall. They moved to a rental in a smaller town about 30 minutes out. Kayla took a front desk job at a chiropractor's office. None of that is what I wanted for any of them. I want to say that clearly. I didn't walk out of the Clement hoping my family's lives would fall apart. I didn't want Dad's business to fail. I didn't want Mom to lose the house. I didn't want any of it. But none of it was mine to fix. 6 weeks after the dinner, I did what I told them I would do. I called Dad and offered to sit with him and a financial counselor. Real help, no strings, no audience. I meant it. He hung up. The offer still stands. It'll keep standing. I've thought about that evening a lot in the months since. And the thing I keep coming back to is this. The most expensive thing I ever paid for wasn't a dinner. It was 15 years of making sure no one at my family's table ever had to feel uncomfortable. It was keeping the peace at the price of my own. It was showing up every single time so that everyone else could relax. The night I stopped paying for that, that was the night I finally had something left over for myself. One dinner, one glass of sparkling water, and a credit card that finally said out loud what everybody already knew but nobody wanted to face. If you have been the family bank, the one they call when something needs paying, not when something needs celebrating, I want you to hear me say this directly. Helping is a choice. It is not a debt you were born into. And a boundary doesn't have to be loud or dramatic or perfect to be real. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to leave. You're allowed to let people sit with the consequences of their own choices. That's not cold. That's just finally taking care of yourself the way you spent years taking care of everyone else. If this story hit home for you, share it. Right now. Text it to one person who needs to hear it. You already know who that person is. Drop a comment and tell me your city and what time it is where you are. And if any part of this felt familiar, If you've ever been the person at the table with the sparkling water, just say "I know" in the comments. I'll see it. Hit that like button if you made it this far. It genuinely helps this channel reach people who need these stories. Subscribe to Silent Revenge and ring the bell so you don't miss the next one. I'll see you in the next story. Take care of yourselves. The right way.